Syria's President Bashar Assad has been welcomed back to an Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia, ending 12 years of isolation in the region. Syria was suspended from the League in 2011 in the wake of the bloody repression of Arab Spring protests that sparked a decade-long civil war. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had pushed for Assad to join the talks in Jeddah. Speaking at the event, Assad said he hopes closer cooperation will ensure peace in the Middle East. All right, well, for more on this, I'm joined by Kristen Helberg, a journalist and author who has spent 7 years living and working in Syria. Thanks for joining us here in the studio. So, the Arab League says it wants an open channel of communication with Assad. Why are they now readmitting Syria?
Well, they don't want to lose Syria to the influence of others, especially to Iranian influence, to Russia, and maybe even to Turkey, because Erdogan, such as his opponent, Kılıçdaroğlu, will reconciliate with Assad. So there's the big question to bring Syria, a strategic, very important country, back to the Arab fold and to make sure that the Arabs themselves have some say and influence there. Then there are different problems in the region. We have the refugee crisis. We have a crackdown market being smuggled. This is an amphetamine that is being smuggled from the Syrian-Lebanese border through Jordan to the Gulf region. It's a billion-dollar business controlled and used by the Assad regime. So they want to start to control this business with the Assad regime. And in the end, basically, it's a Saudi success of Saudi diplomacy saying that, you know, they want to take care of the Arab problems within the Arab region. And this needs Bashar al-Assad to be at the table to confront these issues.
Now, Assad spoke earlier. What did you make of his remarks to the League?
Well, obviously, he is aiming at financial support. He needs to rebuild Syria. He wants to develop Syria. This is what he said. And he has high expectations, especially towards the Saudi and the other Gulf countries there. It's interesting because maybe in the end, he will even set conditions for his own cooperation concerning the refugee problem and the crackdown smuggle, you know, while in the first place, it should have been the Arab League setting conditions for the readmittance of Syria. So he asked for financial support, obviously, and he sent this common message that is very popular within the region right now, saying that, you know, we have a new world order, we have a multipolar world order, we have to be effective players within this, by reunifying the Arab League as well and being a strong player, following their own interests, the Arab interests, confronting even Turkey's influence. He even mentioned the Ottoman Empire, and which is interesting because he's at the same time trying to re-establish some channels to Ankara. But this means that, you know, it's back to the Arab nationalist times. It sounds very much as what we heard some decades ago, you know, calling for a united approach and a united way of dealing within this new world order.
Would you say that this is a huge victory for Assad? And how does this leave others within Syria who are obviously against Assad?
Well, it's a big triumph for himself, definitely. He controls 2/3 of Syria by now. We have in the north areas that are controlled by Turkey proxies, by Islamist groups. We have a region in North Syria controlled by a jihadi faction, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. And we have in the northeast a Kurdish autonomous region that is very much at risk because if the future Turkish president reconciles with Assad, they will ask him to take control over the northeast as well. So definitely it's a high win for him within the country. But what he needs is economic help. He needs money. And unless this money comes into the country, he cannot deliver very much. And basically, he will use this money for his own rule and not as much to take care of the people.
It's obviously a big blow to those opponents that we were just mentioning. Now, also, you're talking about the economic element. He remains under sanctions as well from not only the West, but also the Arab League itself, right? So after today, are we possibly going to be seeing that those sanctions will be lifted?
Well, he is only under sanctions by the West. We have the US and we have the European Union that is still keeping these sanctions in place. We have in the US, we have the efforts to even make these sanctions broader under the so-called Caesar Act. So they will try to even sanction governments and companies that will now deliver financial aid to the Syrian regime, which could stop the Saudi engagement that Assad is hoping for, basically. So in the end, I mean, what is the US especially is trying to do is they try to limit this normalization process to a political sphere and to make it a symbolic victory rather than a real economic victory for Assad that would further strengthen his position within the country. What is very much puzzling for the refugees within the area is this normalization, because they are very much afraid of being forcibly deported back to Syria. And we have seen this in Lebanon, we have seen this even in Turkey. So there is a high fear among Syrian refugees, and we are talking about 7 million refugees who have left the country. So they are really being afraid of, you know, that the local governments could use this normalization process for further cooperation with the security apparatus within the Syrian government and the Syrian regime.
We'll continue speaking in just a moment, but Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky also attended the meeting, as I mentioned before. So let's actually listen in to what he told the delegates.
Ukrainians has never chosen the war. Our troops didn't go to other lands. We do not engage in annexations and plunder of other nations' resources. But we will never submit to any foreigners or colonizers. That's why we fight, and I am sure all your nations will understand this, our main emotion, and I'm also sure all your nations will understand the main call I want to leave here in Jeddah, a noble call to all of you to help protect our people, including Ukrainian Muslim community.
We're here in studio with Kristen Hellberg, a journalist and author who's worked in Syria for 7 years, and we've been discussing the issue of Syria. Now, Zelensky there has been calling for, we'll say, support from the League. Many countries, we'll say, who are there aren't taking sides in the conflict. Why is that?
They are trying to stay neutral because they consider this war a European problem. They are saying, we have had our own conflicts that you try to influence. Now you are having your war. We will not take sides because we want to make sure that we can make our own alliances with world powers and global powers that serve their own interests. We're talking about China, we're talking about Russia, and they see specifically China and Russia as important counterweights to Western influence in the region. So they are saying we are not longer listening to orders from Washington. We are not longer just following Western interest foreign policy. We are having our own independent stance within this new multilateral world order. While at the same time, which is interesting, this Ukraine war has affected the region very differently. We have countries who have benefited from the war immensely, talking about high oil and gas prices, which means that Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, the UAE, have benefited a lot from this war. While at the same time, others suffer very much. Egypt and Lebanon, for example, from the high inflation rates, high prices. So now what we are seeing is Zelensky turning to the global south, beginning in the Arab world, trying to make his point, asking for more support. But I very much doubt that he will get these areas, especially the Gulf countries, who feel very reassured because of their financial power, to take sides. They will make sure that they will balance their foreign policy as they just did during the last few years. They will listen to this. They condemn the aggression of Russia, but they will not take further sides or go. They will not isolate Russia. They will not join sanctions against Russia. No.
So maybe no new support then for Zelensky from the League, do you think?
Verbal support, definitely, diplomatic support, a lot of warm words and talking, but I don't think that they will go that far, like following sanctions against Russia or, helping Ukraine with weapons or something like this. They don't want to take sides in this conflict, which they don't consider to be their own conflict.
Journalist and author Kristen Hellberg, thanks so much for your analysis.
My pleasure.